Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. We are here with David Frangioni. How you doing, David?
Doing great, Gene. Good to be here. Hello, everyone. Happy Veterans Day.
Yes, absolutely, and it's awesome to have you back, David. Did you get my introduction? Did you get what that's from? Because I think you would.
Of course, Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So last time we had David on our channel, we talked about his drumming book, and he had the world's greatest drum sets in his book. I still
Crash.
have that
Yep.
book. It's called
Thank you.
Crash. And you are, I don't know if this is still true, but at the time you were the proud owner of Carl Palmer's steel drum set that you bought off of Ringo.
Yes, that's still true.
You still have it?
I do. Dream come true kit. I don't recall if we told the story or not, but it was something that I had cherished my entire life, almost literally since I was old enough to remember memories. I had that kit as something that was real inspiring, both visually and sonically, of course, because Carl was one of my original drum heroes and even is to this day.
Yeah.
And fortunately, now I can call him a friend as well, which is kind of crazy. But that kit is truly iconic.
That's awesome. And he's still touring and I
Right
heard
now.
that he's trying. Yeah, and I heard that he's trying to take original recordings from ELP and dub them over in a live performance to kind of, make people feel like ELP is still around, kind of a retake on their old music, some classics, maybe some stuff that's unreleased. Have you heard about that?
I'm working with them on it.
Oh, well, obviously you
Yeah,
heard about it then.
I have, and it's going to be absolutely incredible. And it's really
Wow.
going to be an ELP fan's dream come true.
So while we're talking about that, because the reason why I'm having you on is the music aspects of what you do, because you do a lot of stuff, and I want to talk about that in a second. On this recording that you're doing for ELP, is it going to be in surround sound? Is it going to be released in Atmos?
I don't know. Right now, we're just focusing on the live show, which will be
Oh, okay.
stereo. As far as I know now, it's just a stereo show. But the real importance of it is that you'll visually be seeing Greg and Keith on the screen playing, while the song that Carl and his current band are performing, and it's going to be, just so awesome to relive that and to have
Mhm.
Carl's playing, live along with the rest of the band, Paul and Simon, who are incredible, and then seeing Greg and Keith. It's just a beautiful way to continue that treasure, of ELP and the music they created and the live shows that they did that were epic.
And it's amazing that he's almost 70 years old and he still has incredible dexterity and speed. And you compare it to, unfortunately, what Phil Collins is going through, and it's heartbreaking to see Phil Collins in the shape he is now. And he's one of my favorite drum heroes of all time.
Yeah, Carl is playing great. He's just amazing, and thank God he's in great health. Thank God that he's still playing at such a peak level. And the show, he's out touring right now in the Northeast, I believe, and Midwest. And over the next couple of years, we'll be bringing, the ELP 50 show, to more and more places around the world.
Right. And I heard they're making a movie based on with the brain salad surgery soundtrack. I don't know how true, if that's coming to
That's true.
fruition or not.
Yeah, Carnival 9. Yeah, it's going to be great. It's another really exciting project. And they just came out with a book, a special edition ELP book, which I believe is elpbook.com off of memory. But it's a really, really, really cool book, collector's edition. And, it's just it's a great time to be a fan of the band, which I am. I'm an incredible, passionate fan about the band and in Carl's playing and ELP's music. And I grew up at a very, very young age, having discovered it mostly from a drummer's perspective. I was so young. I mean, I was 8 years old, 9 years old, and just was starting to understand like the drumming part of it and listening to Carl's solos and just being blown away. I didn't even know where to start at that age on how to dissect them. And then as the years go on, you start to understand more and more and develop a much greater, vocabulary of what is actually being played, and fine tuning your tastes. And ELP's just always been a really, really special band, and to my tastes.
It's funny because one of my favorite drum tracks that they did is a song that's not on the Tidal album, Brain Salad Surgery. Just the song itself, which I don't understand why it was never put on that album. I love the drum part in that song. I think that he's got such a good groove in that song. It's such a cool song. Greg Lake's voice is so powerful. And I don't want to make this whole broadcast about ELP, but it's cool because you have that connection and you work with Call. And I think it's great mentioning because you don't hear a lot about progressive rock from the 70s these days. And we're trying to keep that stuff alive.
Well, and for good reason. It's by today's standards, it's so contrast to much of if not all of the popular music. But it's still timeless, great music, the virtuosity. So from a musician's perspective, it's awesome. From a song perspective, Lucky Man, and just so many amazing, great songs to cherish. And then now we have the ability to go back and look at some of the videos of these guys playing live and seeing how, just still to this day, how unique, those shows were, with Keith stabbing the piano and the organ, and and Carl's drum kit turning around, and the gongs, and just so many just cool,
Keith playing the keyboards backwards. And back then they didn't have polyphonic keyboards, so that's why he had to stab the note in, because he had to use multiple keyboards to create the sounds that we could take for granted today that you could do with modern electronics.
Right? It's incredible. And the showmanship and the sound, three guys. So everybody should check it out, and I think that especially musicians will really, really enjoy it.
They're really the original powerhouse trio. I know everybody associates that with Rush, and I love Rush, but ELP came first, obviously, and they literally only had 3 people on stage until they toured for Works when they did the orchestration, which unfortunately bankrupted them because they had such large production shows. They would sell out Wembley Stadium. I mean, they've sold out shows of 100,000 people in the crowd,
Yeah, no, the stainless steel kit that you brought up, when we started talking about ELP, that kit's been in front of, at this point, many, many millions of people because of those large stadium shows that they did in their career, that kit was on stage for. So yeah, ELP, and Carl's just playing great, and he's out there. He's a great guy, great friend, great person. And of course, doesn't need me to say this and reinforce it, because he's etched himself into the to the immortal, eternal legends of drumming, but he's a great drummer.
Right. Yeah. And it's a shame that band's not in the Rock Hall of Fame, but I don't want to go down that road, but it is tragic. So why I wanted to have you back, it's been a while. It's been probably 2 years since I interviewed you.
Wow. Time flies.
We talked a lot about home theater. I unfortunately never published that information, and then it got too outdated. So I want to talk to you about your home theater business, but more importantly, I want to talk to you about the fact that you're now mixing Atmos music. And that blows me away, because up until about 1.5 years ago, I thought in my mind that we would never see the ability to stream Atmos music. Then overnight, Apple and Tidal and Amazon literally flipped the switch, and we have hundreds of titles in Atmos streaming music. If you've got a Fire TV, or you have an Apple TV or an NVIDIA, that is a revelation. I can't believe how quickly that happened, and how it's being adopted, and how it's really getting people inspired to listen to multi-channel music. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about that. Are you behind some of this mixing that we're seeing on Apple Music? And what are your thoughts about, what you think is a good speaker layout to take advantage of this format and for people to enjoy immersive surround music?
Well, we'll start at the beginning for a second, and I'll try not to make a long story as long as it really is. I started mixing surround when it was 5.1 digital in the mid 90s. And at that time, it was primarily for DTS. And DTS was making their run into getting to be a consumer format. They had gone in theaters only with Jurassic Park and Casper and a few movies. of course, all Universal movies. And then they wanted to become a format in consumer. So I helped them on all sides of it. I helped them in the studio. I helped them with content creation, with the consumer playback side. And it's a massive undertaking to bring a format into the consumer world. We know Dolby is the standard forever for many types of encode decode, and DTS wanted to be another option for that, and it was just to do that was so huge from all sides, and they pulled it off. They had the wherewithal to get there, and that was my first foray into really learning the content creation side, because fortunately up until that point I had a lot of experience in the home theater side, where people actually consume this and play it back. And of course, there was, for most of the years in the early days, it was analog. It was digitally processed analog encode decode with Dolby Pro Logic 2, and then Dolby got into the consumer digital format 5.1, what they called it originally AC3, right? It's named after the codec, but then quickly realized that was too geeky to be called a consumer format. So they changed it to Dolby Digital, and that's where it all began. So fast forward through the years, mixing a lot of content for Dolby and DTS. MTV, did a ton of their DVDs, Music in High Places. I mixed the whole, surround sound series that they did, and, Brian McKnight and Shanghai and, Sugar Ray and Bombay and like all these just really cool, DVDs that of all these iconic bands and artists in different places in the world. So, and that was a really cool thing to do in surround, because you not only had the music that they were performing in these different regions of the world, but you had all the sound effects, and there were a lot of cool elements to it that were a lot of fun to listen to when it was done. Because ultimately that's what this is all for, right? It's for people's enjoyment. And so I gained a lot of experience through all these different mixes, and we're going through the decades now. And then, as you said, Atmos has been around for 6-7 years at least, but the consumer world really only knew it through home theater again. So when Apple jumped in June, basically, of this year, 2021, that's the game changer. And that's what I learned when we go back to the story with DTS in the mid 90s. One of the reasons that it was so difficult for them to get started is because a format for consumers is a chicken and egg endeavor. Because when you go to Yamaha and Pioneer and Sony and all these manufacturers of consumer goods that put the decoder in, they're all like, well, why would we re-engineer our products with your DTS decoder when there's no content? And then you go to all the content places and say, oh, we want to encode your movie in DTS or remix it and put it out in DTS. Well, where can anybody play it? And so it's really challenging, and it's really hard to launch. So Apple, of course, being the standard for billions of people now and products out there, once they decide, okay, we're going to support a format, then the floodgates open, and you've just got tremendous just capacity for people to enjoy this. And now all you need to do, and I'm not saying that to minimize the significance of it and the time consumption of it, because they're both pretty heavy and high, but all you need to do is add that Atmos content now, because the rest of it is done. If we go back to the DTS challenge, they had nowhere for anybody to listen to it. So at the beginning, now they do, but then they didn't. So having a front row seat and being involved in all those things, I have a pretty unique appreciation for what's happening now, which is Apple has adopted it, as you said, and these other formats. And now what we're doing is it was a natural progression that I've been asked to mix a lot of products and projects into immersive and Atmos. And then here we are, and it's absolutely awesome. I mean, it's a whole new experience. And to answer your question, Gene, about the mixing and the setup, you've got the physical speaker layout of a true Atmos playback system, which is 712 or 714 ideally, right? So left, center, right up front, two sides, two backs, and then your object-based overheads, which is the 0.2 or the 0.4, and then a sub, the 0.1 for the LFE.
At least one sub. We
So-
usually do 2 to 4, but yeah, at least one sub.
Yeah, at least one sub, and sometimes there's another sub, but it's really an extension of the front three or the primary 7. So and it's what we'll call a base management sub, but nonetheless, absolutely, 712, 714, 724, etc. And then in the prosumer, like the Bel Air circuit playback, 916, etc., 926.
Oh, so that would be adding wides, right?
Yeah, that would be adding the front wides, and then now you can play back like the home commercial version for the guys that have first run movie capability in their home theaters. So those are the physical speaker layouts that you really want to play back Atmos. But with every Atmos mix that I do, and I think that most people do, there's a binaural mix, which is an enhanced stereo mix for headphones, because there's so many people, of course, listening on some form of headphones, AirPods, etc. And that is a much better experience than just listening to the straight stereo mix. So it's really, I think Apple's done a great job in that there's enhanced playback and enhanced emotion, energy, etc. from spatial audio, regardless of whether it's 2 channels or more.
So I'm confused for a minute. If I go on an Atmos track on Apple Music and I'm using my headphones, will it automatically default to the binaural track? I didn't know that was even an option.
Well, it's playing back the binaural. If you only have stereo, then that's all it can play back. It's just stereo. Whether it folds the Atmos or it plays the actual binaural, that Apple either created from its own algorithm or whether it's the one that was provided. It's still 2 channel. I mean, you've got Atmos in its native format requires some set of speakers. Now we're talking about playing back. When we talk about 712, 714, etc., that's playing back the native mix entirely as it was mixed.
Right.
One of the great things about how Dolby has kind of engineered Atmos is that you've got all these fold down options. So, because think about it. How many people have 714? Even home theaters, advanced home
pretty
theaters
rare.
would have it. But in the looking at the number of consumers out there, it's a very small number that have that many speakers and have it all set up. A lot of the home theaters I build, if not all of them, have that. But again, that's the minority. So you've got to be able to fold it down. Of course, Dolby and Apple know this, and they've engineered for the masses. It's fantastic. So regardless, if you're listening to any of the new mixes, which when you look at the Apple logos next to these mixes, you can see it's spatial, lossless, Apple, etc. And it's real. I think it's still all evolving. I mean, this is months old in the consumer world.
It really is. It's really new.
This is cutting edge. And so, it's evolving, and standards are still evolving, and, there's a lot changing, but it's all great. It's all for the better of consumer playback. And, we went backwards for a long time there, going to MP3s. If you look at the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, it was a progression of formats, even though some will argue that, early digital was a step backwards from really good vinyl, and that's valid in a lot of cases. For the most part, it was improving. And, and eventually CD got really good, and DACs and transports got really good, right? So we were like evolving. Then we went to multi-channel. Then we went to DVDA and SACD, and then SACD caught up to DVDA in terms of multi-channel, because originally it was only stereo.
Yep.
So it's just getting better and better and better, and then it becomes MP3, stereo, and the whole quality quest kind of collapses in the
Yeah, because they
mainstream.
traded quality for convenience.
Right. And and we understand that, even though as fellow audiophiles, you and I don't like it, and we certainly were disappointed in what direction it took, especially sonically. But we understand why. And now here we are, and it's turning the other way now. And that's just it's an awesome
Yeah.
time to be listening to music, because here we are now, the masses, we're kind of picking it back up from where it stopped in the early 2000s, when I'll call like the audio consumer format progression kind of paused and we went backwards with MP3, and now we're picking it back up. And we're gonna go back to streaming delivery with very high quality and very I would call it evolved mixes.
And it's actually a quantum leap forward, because if you go back in time when we try to do DVD audio, we didn't have a digital connection originally. We didn't have base management sorted out. It was
Yep.
obscure. It was not marketed correctly. The interface wasn't right. Now
Yep.
we've got everything done in the digital domain. We're streaming off of a huge platform like Apple Music, much more digestible. We got major artists. You got Billie Eilish. All of her
Yeah.
music is in Atmos now. If you can't reach people with immersive sound with her, you're not going to reach them at all. I mean, this is the masses. You're getting people evolved into wanting to have multi-channel, because now, let's face it, with COVID, more people are streaming, direct to your house movies that are in the theaters. So it's even more fuel and more ammunition to get people to get into a multi-channel surround system. And then as a byproduct, they could stream music now as well.
Absolutely. And that's what's so great. I mean, it kept evolving with product and formats and manufacturers, and trying to get these consortiums of like, okay, Sony and Philips develop this, and then Pioneer goes in this direction, and then everybody kind of had to agree, and it took forever. And like you said, like the big Sony's DSD versus Meridian's MLP, DVDA, and all of the generations, even early on, of the players that never really had solid footing, and people never really understood what was what. Those were just kisses of death for formats before they even really got started. But here we
Right.
are today. It took a behemoth such as Apple, and they kind of dictated the plan. And the plan was, let's get all the hardware in place, and let's get everybody compatible through all of these various platforms for playback, and then deliver the software that enhances that. And now it'll start to grow, side by side. The hardware will get better, the software will get better, etc. But it took a tech giant in this day and age, 20 years after all of the consumer arm wrestling, to get to today. And it's awesome. And I love listening to it. I love mixing it. I'm really blessed that I'm able to really be completely, I hate to use the word immersed in it, because that's kind of almost cheesy.
That's a good
Immersive.
pun. Yeah.
But I am immersed in it. That's the funny part about it, is that from a playback standpoint, delivering theaters that are world class in playback, audio and video wise, and then on the other side, creating content that is played back in those theaters. I love doing both. I'm not satisfied with just one or the other, because I'm passionate about both of them, and it's just awesome. It's a great time to be a music and movie lover.
Right, for sure. So let me ask you this now. Do you think, with Atmos being the de facto standard for streaming, whether it's Netflix or any of your content providers, and now being the standard for music, do you think this is kind of the nail in the coffin for Aural 3D? Because I don't see that ever emerging as a format that people are going to be using in any extent. There's just no software for it. So you're basically relegated to an up mixer, which in my opinion is no much better than a Dolby surround up mixer.
You know, I don't know. I don't know if what's gonna make it or not make it. And there's 360, and it's too hard to say, because a nail in the coffin would mean that it just dies and there's no, nobody's supporting it at all and it goes away. And, look at quad in the 70s, right? I mean,
Yeah.
playback equipment and content just stopped. Everybody just decided on both sides of the equation, hey, this is a format that doesn't have a lifespan. I don't know if that's going to be the case now because, if there's enough people that enjoy it and there's enough content creators that enjoy putting their music into that format, then you don't have to have all the masses to still have a format that people enjoy and that has enough success to stay alive. So whether or not that is the case, we'll see. The fact is that the monster, like the complete solution has emerged, and not surprisingly, it's Dolby and Apple, and now all the labels are following suit in providing appropriate compatible content, and that's awesome. I mean, consumers, they want to enjoy, they want to be moved by the content, whether it's a film, a streaming show, a song, whatever it is. They want to be moved. They want it to affect their life in some way, whether it makes them laugh or cry or sing or smile or whatever it is. And we're the guys, all of us, the guys and girls in the teams that are, it's our job to provide that, to, evoke as much emotion and as much, impact in whatever is relevant to what we're mixing and putting together as possible so that people enjoy it. They have that very, very high entertainment value. And what's available now from a mixing standpoint, as far as being able to create this content and put it into surround sound and immersive, it's just almost limitless. It's just your imagination would be the only limiting factor. And then from a playback standpoint, it's pretty much at the same point. If you had the means to put together a really awesome playback theater, home theater or a great media room, you'd never want to leave it because the content is playing back, such fidelity that, you experience things that it's hard to describe, right? I mean, you're a fellow, to say the least, you're a fellow, enthusiast of hi-fi audio, audiophile, immersive home theater. I mean, we have very similar, passions. So, it's hard to describe to somebody what this does. It's like once they experience it, even for 5 minutes with a little clip, whether it's audio, video, or both, then they start to go, oh my God, I've never heard or seen anything like this. And that's
it's mesmerizing.
And that's the only way to really understand it to the fullest extent, is to experience it.
So if somebody's setting up a Atmos system for the first time and their focus is music, like we're talking, is your recommendation put in those height channels in the ceiling as tops, or do you prefer front and rear height on the walls?
No, I typically like them as tops.
Yeah.
I
think there's an advantage to that because when you're putting speakers on the front and back walls, the front walls are going to be way further away from the listener than the tops. And there tend to be small speakers with lower dynamic range and lower sensitivity. So I really like to have my speakers at plus or minus 20 degrees for my tops, for my Atmos channels. I just feel like
in my home theater, I have 716 and I have 4 overheads and I have 2 in the front that are ceiling firing, right? Which is what you're referring to, right? You talk about the floor firing at the ceiling. Right. What people could, right. Which is one of the benefits of Atmos technology, is that, that could work. And I wanted to hear, because my processor supports the channels and the playback, I wanted to actually hear, instead of putting a third pair in the ceiling, I purposely put them as the front firing because I wanted to hear the differences and play with it. Like my home theater, in my particular case, I never would do this for a client, but for my own case, I do it, which is, it's essentially my lab. So as much as I love to go in there and actually use it like any other end user, I actually go in there and tweak even more than I actually watch content. And so I'm always listening and tweaking, and I want to understand what the playback variations are and what the results will be depending on, how the speakers are laid out, how you set them up, what your delay offsets are, your calibration, your EQ, and your placement, your physical placement. Because although we have, tools to adjust for placements that are not necessarily optimum, we also, won't need to use those tools as much, and we'll have a more natural playback environment when we can place the speakers where we measure them, to ideally be. So my theater is a combination of that on purpose. And the overheads are much more, to me, they're much more impactful than the floor firing at the ceiling.
Yeah, the bouncy ones. The problem with the Atmos enabled speakers, and we've spoken about this in the past, the first generation of them were atrociously bad because they just use a little 4-inch whizzer cone with a 9-element crossover to simulate the head related transfer function, which we don't really need that complexity in the crossover because our brain does that already. But the next generations, they got better when they had a waveguide on the tweeter. And then the recommendations got better because, and I noticed this when I first started testing, if you have those bouncy speakers, the reflection speakers at ear level, they still spray wider than they do just going to the ceiling and back. And you could localize that speaker. But if you get it above ear level, it becomes less localized, and the reflections off the ceiling become stronger as you get it higher up towards the ceiling. So I always tell people Atmos enabled speakers as a last resort, but ultimately, if you want sound to come from a particular location, you put the speaker in that location and it's going to give you a better result.
Well, I think that, the overhead is absolutely, it is. The advice is well, well provided advice. It's important to, to have them overhead, to really have them placed where you got to have. Let's start at the beginning for a second, because when we talk about things like speaker placement, there's context that's really, really important, right? Even though we can speak generally, I always say you build a listening room or a theater around the optimum seat, right? So you have a 4-row theater. It's not being built around all 4 rows. Even though people will be sitting in all 4 rows, you're not going to get 4 sweet spots. You're going to get it sounding great around the room, but you're building it around a central sweet spot. So where's the client, the primary client, or group of clients going to be sitting? First 2 rows, middle 2 rows, last 2 rows, etc. Same thing with playback. Where are they going to listen, and where are they going to, want to enjoy the content from? Then from there, you're adjusting the speakers to, overhead, front overhead, rear overhead, etc. And that's where all your measurements come from, and that's what you're basically dialing the system in from.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing I wanted to ask you about, I've perused the catalog on Apple Music for Atmos Music, and there's a lot that, I wouldn't say a lot, but there's a good deal of Atmos tracks that seem like they're not really Atmos. They're just kind of gimmickly upmixed. I don't know if you've experienced it. Like I tried Rush. I forgot. I think it was Tom Sawyer. That sounded really bad in Atmos. So I'm wondering, is there some of that where they don't really have a native mix, obviously because it's older music, and they just did some type of upmixing and then they called it Atmos?
I haven't heard the Tom Sawyer mix, so I can't speak to that, but I will check it out and see what it sounds like. All the Atmos mixing I'm doing is primarily, from multi-tracks or stems, most of it is being done. So it's not just taking a stereo file and upmixing. I will say though, there have been artists that have come to me that I have upmixed from stereo in certain cases where that's all that exists. And it sounds markedly better than stereo. So I would challenge, in all fairness, and I mean this sincerely, I don't mean it because I'm the one mixing it. I mean it really as objective as I can hear it and have an opinion about it, that it's not gimmicky. It really it really sounds better, or at the very least different. But I haven't been involved in any projects where anybody's just trying to do a marketing thing and they're like, hey, just do whatever you can to throw this through the Atmos grinder and let's come out with Atmos so we have Atmos. Every project I've been involved in, every project I'm lined up to be involved in, all the artists and the labels, et cetera, they're all very passionate about, hey, we want to get another perspective on this music. And we're going to use Atmos to do that, whether it's more ethereal, dramatic, cinematic, more punchy, more full, you have so many different approaches you can take with it. And they all evoke different types of emotions, but they definitely heighten the playback experience and they don't come across gimmicky, and I remember early days of surround, I heard exactly what you're referring to, Gene. Like somebody would play me a mix and go, yeah, we just got hired to do the surround mix. Like the timbales are flying behind my head. And, there's like a lot of activity to prove that this is surround sound. Like, we're going to make sure you don't miss that this is a multi-channel mix. So we're going to have stuff flying over your head. And my approach has always been that what you hear and see, and if we're speaking music specifically, so there's no see to it, right? We're just listening. What you hear is heightened. How do I listen to what it starts with, which what artists recorded and wrote and performed, and how do I take that to another level emotionally? And part of that is the sonic perfection, we'll call it, or as perfect as you can get it, where you really dial it in and, you denoise and you place things, exactly where you really feel that they should be placed. Some artists record with the drummer from behind the drum kit. So the hi-hats, on your left as you're listening, as if the drummer were sitting there, and other artists do it as if you're in the audience, or the hi-hats on the right, like all of these perspectives that are relevant to the artist's vision, and really understand that, take it to the max and use the tools at hand to do it. And naturally, when you have a tool like Atmos immersive audio to play back, binaural and spatial audio, et cetera, you're going to be able to take it to another level. And sometimes doing that is subtle. And I know you can appreciate that because you're an audiophile. So it's not always, some music, it is very dramatic because the music is dramatic. So now all of a sudden, there's a group of people talking in the intro. So you put them around you and you feel like you're in the crowd, like you could never do that in stereo. So it's like really pronounced, but it's emotionally relevant and heightened. So it makes perfect sense. But other music is the surround or the binaural and the sprinkles are going to be just, when you A/B them, you go, wow, like I much prefer the immersive. But without A/Bing them, the immersive isn't flying over your head and doing all these things that are super pronounced in that regard. So it's all
So with orchestral music, you could just be using the Atmos effects to create the ambience of the venue that they're playing in, which is excellent.
It would be huge. It would be huge. You would literally be sitting in the middle of a concert hall, and you don't have to hear the violins behind you because you're going to hear the violins in the hall behind you. And that spatiality is the whole definition of immersive. And you're really feeling like I'm listening to the Berlin Symphony at the Symphony Hall, in Germany, with all of the acoustic characteristics of where the orchestra performs. And this is just awesome. This is incredible. This has transported me to that environment. And so that's exactly right, Gene.
Yeah. So I wanted to bring up this comment here because I noticed this immediately when I started streaming Atmos on Tidal. There was a big difference in level between the Atmos track versus the stereo track. Apple also has this problem, not quite as bad as what I found in Tidal, but the thing about Apple that really is an issue, in my opinion, is you'll be playing an Atmos track. If you go and just randomly select an Atmos track, if you let it continue to play, it might go to a 2-channel track, and that level and 2 channels 10 or 15 dB hotter than Atmos, and it blows you out of your seat. Is there anything that they're looking at to try to normalize the levels between an Atmos track and 2-channel through streaming? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's the specification is evolving. When you look at the spec that we were given as mixing engineers a year ago, right? It's not that long ago, right? But in this
Mhm.
format, it's a lifetime ago. So even well before Apple even, released the hardware and made the announcement in June, there were specifications and mixing was taking place because that's how all the content rolls out on time, right? So we're doing this actually ahead of the consumer schedule, and so the specification is it has been changing and evolving for the better. And so the levels are something that I'm not privy to what Apple is doing until they announce it and give it to the content providers like myself, the content creators. So but I can say that it's always being evolved. So there'll be another spec that'll come out soon, I'm sure, and everything just keeps getting better. The relationship from a technical standpoint, which is going to give you the closer level matching that you're referring to, et cetera, between the stereo version and the Atmos version, is always evolving right now. So, it's early
Right.
days. It's still early days.
Yeah, I got you. So another question I wanted to bring up, and I'm wondering this, I haven't done the direct comparison because anytime you switch to an Atmos track, whether it's on Apple Music or Tidal, there's like a 4-second dropout before the music kicks in, which is an infinite amount of time when you're trying to A/B compare and actually get meaningful results. So people are asking, is there a difference in quality between Tidal Atmos tracks versus Apple? I know Tidal has a big controversy with MQA, how it alters the signal not in a favorable way. I'm not sure if it's doing anything like that with Atmos, or do you think it's transparent because you're passing Atmos through the streaming device? It shouldn't matter.
Well, what they're doing, I haven't A/B'd Tidal to Apple and analyzed it to where I could tell you if it's the same bit rate. What we provide for the source mix is one Atmos mix encoded into Atmos, right? So
Right.
everybody's getting the same mix. Now, whether they are decoding it differently with variable bit rates, because Dolby technologies have always had the ability to vary bit rate playback, to adjust for how much
Hmm.
bandwidth is available. So, that would be, if there's a difference, that would be where it's happening, is that one format from another needs to uh, either it's inhibiting, it's reducing the bandwidth and the bit rate, or it's just playing it back natively, which is ideally, of course, what you want.
So the mixes you do, are they in True HD or in the Dolby Digital Plus?
No, they're True HD. They're Atmos. They're discrete 714 mixes
Okay, because as far as
encoded
I know,
into true
you
Atmos.
can't right now you can't stream True HD. As far as I know, it's all Dolby Digital Plus. So at some point, it's being, I guess, downgraded to lossy. Even though it still sounds great, it's still not. You're not streaming the True HD layer of Atmos on. I don't think you are on Tidal or on Apple Music. I know you're not for Netflix and for Amazon Prime. That's all Dolby Digital Plus. But I don't think we're streaming True HD on any platform right now.
When I QA a mix through the renderer, and I take it out of the studio, I put it onto an MP4 as an Atmos file so that my consumer receiver and processor actually see it as if I just put a 4K disc in or whatever. It doesn't know the difference, right? It's an Atmos bit stream, and it
Mm-hmm.
just knows whether it can decode it or not. And it decodes it fine and plays it back exactly as I mixed it in terms of 714, et cetera. So what has to happen with the streaming formats is they just have to catch up to, remember, this is from June, right?
Yeah.
So as we are doing this today, you and I, Gene, it's November 11th, right? So this is really, as fast as technology moves, this is such a huge shift in technology. This is
Mm-hmm.
a sea change. This isn't, like a bump. This is an iPhone 12 to iPhone 13. This is like the discovery of the iPhone in and of itself. This is a huge sea change. And so the hardware is going to have to catch up. The implementation of that hardware. I mean, Apple TVs can play an Atmos track back, even though if it's compressed. But getting all the hardware and the software to work together and have the OS updates, etc., bring the compatibility that we ultimately want. I'm sure they're all still, catching up to, what'll ultimately be the ability to full range play back these mixes that are being done. But it's going to take a little bit of time. I mean, we're already way ahead a year ago.
I'm enjoying the progression, to be honest with you. I mean, all the modern artists are doing it now. You got The Weeknd is doing it. You've got, like I said, Billie Eilish, Ariana Grande. I mean, it's just incredible that the mainstream artists are embracing Atmos music. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about. So what are some of the mixes that you've done recently? And what artists have you mixed? What songs have you mixed? And what have been some of your favorites?
Well, a lot of the mixes that I've been working on, when the actual artists, the different, a lot of them are just like, hey, we don't really want to talk about who's mixing what and who's doing what. And it's not really it's still kind of a behind the scenes thing to who's doing what. So I can just tell you topically that, they're all world famous artists. They're all, full albums. There's catalog stuff. There's recent stuff. There's a lot of really, really cool projects. And there's also, what's really surprising me is that there's a lot of unsigned bands too, that are kind of having the wisdom to go, hey, we're putting this out ourselves, but we're going to be behind the times from the first mix that we present in our new career before we even start, right? Because if we don't have immersive, and if you go up to Apple Music and you see the Beatles and Justin Bieber in Atmos, and then you put our mix and it's just stereo, like before anybody even begins evaluating, you're not quite there. And I'm really blown away by how many artists who are not world famous, because it's obvious that the artists with fan bases are going to all have their music encoded in this. And I'm privileged and honored to work on that stuff. But I also really enjoy working on the stuff that is up and coming, and that the artist is trying to make a name for themselves, but they get the sonic benefit of this, and they want to be able to compete and really bring their music to the highest level.
So speaking of new artists, I want to plug a new artist that we recently discovered. Her music is incredibly well engineered and produced, audiophile grade music that you want to listen to. Her name is Dominique Fils-Aime. She's a Canadian singer. Her first album, Nameless, which is really an audiophile favorite, explores more of the soul side of her music. The second album, Stay Tuned, is more of the jazz side, and then she has a third album that's more soul. So I wanted to introduce you. We're going to have her on the channel next week. We're going to be interviewing her. Her music sounds so incredibly good upmixed. I'm talking about just taking the 2-channel and putting it through the Dolby upmixer. It sounds immersive. Like when you hear the rim shot of the drums, you hear it to the sides. She does so much layering of the vocals, and the upmixer just has a field day with it. It opens up the soundstage from just regular 2-channel. So it already sounds as good or better than some of the Atmos mixes I've heard. So I can only imagine if she hooked up with you and you guys did a true immersive surround track for her music, it would take it to the next level. I'm hoping I can make that connection for you guys, and at the very minimum, check out her music, because I think you'll like it.
That's awesome. How did you put it through a surround processor, and that's what did the upmix? How did you hear it back?
Yeah. So I originally was streaming it. My good friend Don Dunn, who's a regular on our channel from HD 2020, he put a demo list together of these different tracks that we test speakers with. And the first track I listened to was called Birds. And the stand-up bass in there is just incredible. The snapping effects, you just hear every little detail. I'm like, I wonder what happens if I throw this through the Dolby upmixer. And as when I did that, it didn't take away from the soundstage of the front. It just expanded it. And you know how sometimes you could throw 2-channel music through an up mixer and it doesn't sound that great, like
Starts to
especially if
sound
it's
hollow.
jazz.
Yeah.
Yes, you don't get that. This just accentuates the greatness of that recording.
Well mixed.
So
What processor do you use?
I have the Storm Audio ISP MK2.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So the cool thing about that is my front 3 speakers are fully active. I use FIR room correction. So I have a digital connection from the Storm going into Marani DSP, and then that goes to Pascal amplification for the RBH speaker system. So
Nice.
it's state of the art. It
So
really,
it's clean and powerful. Yeah.
oh,
Nice.
yeah. I mean, I
Great.
don't know if you've ever messed with FIR correction, and that's another topic we could talk about. But if you get the transfer function of both speakers identical, when you
Yeah.
sit in that sweet spot, you get the strongest phantom center you've ever heard. Like it sounds like there's a center channel anchored right in front of you, and the speakers just disappear.
Love it. Well, I'm a big fan of room correction done right. I've worked with Steinway Lingdorf for a long time, who have the room perfect technology, which is also in the Macintosh high-end processor, and it's really you're absolutely right. Another one of those things that's not easily describable. We can technologically describe it, we can scientifically describe it, but you have to hear it, because when you hear it and you hear the phase coherency of the bass response and the arrival times exactly as they were mixed, with everything on point, exactly what you just said, it's a whole nother, you're listening to like something, it's like listening to different content. It's so different than the same content on a system that doesn't have that, which for the most part, or most systems don't have that. So I can appreciate it. That's awesome. I got to hear your system sometime when I'm over there.
Well, you're a neighbor. You're in Miami, so you're not that far away. I'm in, a little north of Tampa in Wesley Chapel. So anytime you're in the Tampa area, I would love to have you here. We could do some videos together. Whatever you want to do would be awesome.
I want to check it out. I want to hear this and I want to hear the system. That sounds absolutely awesome.
Yeah, and I've actually had some help with Anthony Gramani. I know you know of him. He's helped with the acoustics of the room, so we have the room really nicely tuned. So yeah, nice. I would definitely love to have you there for sure. So David, it's awesome. I mean, I'm happy for you, man. I know you've been so busy. You set out to become the world's greatest drummer, and I know what you said that at your young age, and that didn't happen. But you are a very accomplished drummer, regardless of being the greatest or not. Then you launched a very successful home theater business. You do very upscale home theaters in Miami, and I think you go beyond Miami, right? Do you do installs?
Well, all over the world. Well, the first business you're referring to is Audio One, which I sold 3 years ago, and then started Frangioni Media, and I still work with Audio One, but the focus that I have is building recording studios and home theaters that are fully realized, like for aficionados, people that really appreciate and want the difference in their playback environment. Just like there are people that are really into having the world's greatest wine cellar, and someone else would think they're crazy, that someone else doesn't even drink wine. Somebody has an incredible garage full of amazing vehicles that they're really passionate about. My clients are that for audio and video, whether it's 2-channel, whether it's recording studio and their creators, or whether it's a home theater. And that's the lane that on that side of things that I've carved out, because that's the thing that I love to do the most. It's challenging. Every single person's room is different, and everybody's needs are different. At the end of the project, all the needs are the same, which is high performance that's easy to use. That's what everybody wants in a nutshell. But getting the easy to use is actually easy. At this point, especially after 35 years of putting together control systems and whatnot. But the high performance is always a challenge to figure out what are the considerations in the room. Are there isolation considerations that have to be brought in as well? Because a lot of people want to be able to enjoy their playback environment regardless of what time of day or night it is, but there are other people in the house or the neighborhood, right? So there's a lot of layers to it, and it just makes it incredibly fun.
Yeah, it's awesome. And then on the side, you also run a drumming magazine.
Well, I bought Modern Drummer, the #1 drum magazine in the world, 2 years ago. It's been in existence for 45 years. It's number one, you know, as I said, it is number one in the world. It's where all the drummers,
Yep.
you know, get together. It's the kind of the glue of the drumming community. And I bought it just before the pandemic hit. So it's been quite a roller coaster ride as a, you know, as all of us have been on, especially having, it's an established business, but it was new to me. And it was also a business that was going in transition. The brand itself was very solid, but they had lost their founder, years ago. And along, you know, their founder passing away and the founder's successor passing away, they kind of lost their way a little bit. And I was asked to come in and just kind of reinvigorate it, which we're doing. And you know, it's great. It's utilizing my business and technology experience with something, again, that I'm very passionate about, drumming, and keeping the drum community together, which is awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. Speaking of drumming, one of my all-time favorite drummers is Gavin Harrison. I've been trying to get him to interview on YouTube, but he sent me a message saying that I don't talk much about music on my channel, so he doesn't see the relevance, which I was heartbroken to hear him say that. I hope he reconsiders, because Porcupine Tree is back, and I'm excited. They have a new album coming out next year. They just released a single, and it's in Atmos. So if you go on Apple Music and you go to the Porcupine Tree music section, their brand new song is in Atmos. It's already mixed in Atmos. I don't know if you're a fan or not, but it sounds great.
I'm a huge fan. Gavin is a friend of mine. He's an awesome guy. He's one of the greatest drummers.
He's amazing.
And of course, and the bands. I saw him with King Crimson as a guest of his.
Yep, I was there too. Yep.
Right? Yep.
Yep.
So I was at the South Florida show in July. He's just, you know, he's incredible. He's an awesome guy. He's an incredible drummer. The new album is
he's a
incredible.
surgeon. He's literally a surgeon on the drums. Like, everything is perfectly placed timing wise. He's got those little cymbals that he hits with surgical precision. It's just a treat to watch him play.
It is. He's one of a kind, and he really is, as a person and as a drummer. And his versatility, and you listen to him playing with King Crimson and then Porcupine Tree and just all these musical projects that he's integral.
Pineapple Thief.
I mean,
he elevated, because I was not even a Pineapple Thief fan until he came onto the band, and he just literally elevated the music. I mean, it's just their last 2 or 3 albums have been phenomenal. You always can tell when Gavin's on the drums.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah.
He was in the Modern Drummer Festival we had last year. This year, I think he's going to be too busy to do our 2021, but our 2020 festival, which was a tribute to Neil Peart, it's actually still on the moderndrummer.com website for anybody that wants to see it. It's an awesome, awesome festival. And he's performing in it. I mean, there's so many amazing drummers. Stuart Copeland's in there, and Thomas Lang, and I mean, now to Michael Walden. It just goes on and on and on. There's dozens and dozens of world-class drummers. But Gavin's performance is a real showstopper. Todd Zuckerman, also another showstopper on in that festival. But it's really just a blast. So if you want to check out Gavin, check out the festival.
Is it all rock drummers, or do you do jazz as well? Because I'm a huge fan of Antonio Sanchez from Pat Metheny. I don't know if you know of him.
Of course, I love Antonio. He's great. He's not in the festival. Les DeMurle's in the festival. You know, but because it was a tribute to Neil Peart, a lot of the drummers were really directly impacted. They were either friends of Neil's or very, very impacted by Neil. So it was rock drumming leaning because of that. But, you know, Les DeMurle's performance, to this day, a lot of people say that's one of their favorite performances at the festival. And he's, you know, very much a jazz drummer.
Interestingly enough, I had Antonio Sanchez on. I interviewed him about 1.5 years ago. He told me he grew up as a teenager playing all the drums for Rush. Like, he played the covers. That's how he started out on the drums. So imagine a 12, 13-year-old Antonio Sanchez just acing all the drum tracks for Rush. Musical prodigy in the make. And the guy's a PhD in piano. I mean, he like went to school for becoming a concert piano, and he happens to be one of the best drummers of all time. And it's just that stuff like that blows my mind, how people hone their precision of their talent, even if they didn't go to school for that particular thing. You know, it's just amazing to me.
Well, it is. And that's what Modern Drummer celebrates. You know, you read it comes out as in a magazine style format digitally every month. We're transitioning from print to digital, and
Good.
yeah, exactly. It's a must. And you've got just, these world famous drummers that when you read their story and you get the kind of insight that only modern drummer brings with the quality of editorial and interviews that we put together every month, it's just transformational. You get to listen to these stories and learn about the backgrounds and what people did to get to the height of their instrument. And a lot of times the path there is way different than you ever imagined, because we hear the drummer today and we understand, okay, this is what they sound like. But when you learn how they got there, it changes your life. You learn like, wow, oh, okay, I can apply these principles to my own journey. And it's awesome.
That's great. So yeah, David, if you could put a good word in for Gavin for me next time you talk to him, I'd appreciate it. I'd love to have him on the channel. I'm
Maybe we'll come on,
porcupine.
him, Gavin, and me. We'll do it together. He might be more comfortable because I can talk the geek stuff that he would like to stay away potentially from talking about. I don't want to speak for him, but if I don't know how far he goes in the audiophile world that you and I live in. I know he does in terms of what he hears and what his sound is. There's no question about that. But from a technical standpoint, I think he's more, I think his view tends to be how it all impacts the music. A real drummer's drummer, a musician's musician. I'm not going to speak for him. This is just my own hypothesis.
Yeah. That's great. I mean, I've interviewed Stephen I had Stephen Wilson on the channel. So it's like, even though we're a home theater website, people listen to music on a home theater website. I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? So awesome.
Stephen Wilson is in the Jethro Tull remixes and the famous mixing engineer, Stephen Wilson.
He did King Crimson. He's the singer for Porcupine Tree. He has his own solo work. He's done Yes remixes. He's had his hands in a lot of stuff, and now he kind of dabbled in becoming a pop star with his last album, Future Bites, it's a good album. It's just not what the fans are used to. It's kind of like how Phil Collins went into the whole pop thing after Genesis, but now he's bringing it back.
Mixing though is incredible.
It's great, and he follows no rules. So he doesn't follow he comes up with his own mix technique, and it works. I mean, I have every one of their albums in 5.1 and even their concerts, and they're just excellent sounding music and good music, engaging music. So David, I appreciate you coming here today. We got to have you back on the channel. We'll do some more focused topics about home theater if you want in the future. I'm glad to see you're doing so well. You have your hands in many cookie jars, which is diversity is the way to survive in this business. And it's awesome to hear about all of your success stories, and keep mixing that Atmos music because I'll keep listening.
Thank you. Well, you can count on that. I'm mixing immersive, every day pretty much. So it's something that is just getting started really. So thank you for your support. Thank you everybody for joining us today. And it's been great talking to you.
Awesome. Guys, don't forget about our Patreon channel at patreon.com/audioholics. We appreciate your support. You get direct access to us if you want to ask questions or suggest video topics. Hit the thumb up notification, hit the bell notification, spread the word. If you guys are really into music, check out David Frangioni's links down below. I'll put a link to the Modern Drummer, and I'll put a link to his website so you can learn more about his Atmos mixing. And until next time, my friends, keep listening